It started like any other Tuesday. The house was quiet the way it always was at 9 in the morning. Coffee machine gurgling in the kitchen, sunlight spilling through the blinds and forming lazy lines across the living room rug. I was folding laundry, socks into pairs, when I noticed my phone. His name on the screen. Tom. It should have been ordinary. It wasn't. At first the voice on the other end sounded tired, thin with a distance I'd never heard before. "Hey, hon, he started and then cut himself off. He said he had to go out of town for work, that there were some things to handle. I remember saying, "Okay. Call if you need anything." He told me not to worry. 2 days later, I tried to log into our joint account to transfer money for the mortgage. The password failed. I called him. "Try the number on the back of the card," he said. I did. Declined. The card was gone. So was he. At first I convinced myself it was a mistake. People forget passwords. Phones die. Work trips happen. But then bills started bouncing. My email pings turned into frantic calls from the bank. The line from the mortgage company was a blunt, metallic thing. "Miss, your account is overdrawn." Several large withdrawals. I felt something cold bubble up in my chest. I drove to the bank. The teller pulled up the ledger and point by point showed me the devastation. Multiple transfers over a single night, to an account registered to a woman named R. Collins. 2 transfers to an offshore account. Cash withdrawals from ATMs in 3 different states. The total, my voice broke when she said it, was everything we owned. The emergency fund, the savings for Lily's college, the renovation money for the kitchen, the small stash we'd been squirreling away for years. Empty. I sat in my car in the parking lot and let the world slip from me. I called him again. Voicemail. Then a different ringtone, the one he set for emergencies, an old habit of his. And then a voice. Not his. A female voice, warm and private and too familiar. "Tom can't come to the phone right now." I remember the strange, stupid thing I did next. I called the number on his office card. A receptionist answered, then put me through to a man who had the wrong kind of calm in his voice. "Mr. Bennett's not in the office," he said. "He's traveling. Can I take a message?" I told the truth, my name, my concern. "We'll pass it on." The calls to him stopped going through. His social account stayed frozen, but his messages to my mother, oh God, were being sent, coy little texts about fresh starts and new opportunities. They were sent from the same phone service that our mortgage was in. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. 3 days passed. My head spun with questions. Where had he gone? Who was R. Collins? Why would he throw everything away like this? I lay awake at night listening to the house breathe around me, thinking of the life we'd built. Our tiny rituals, the inside jokes, the fights that always ended in apologies and a long embrace. The house felt suddenly enormous and empty. I tried talking to him once more. This time his voice came through, thin and careful. "We need to talk later," he said. "I can explain." His explanation never came. Instead, my mother called me in the middle of the night. She sounded sharp and defeated. "He called me," she said. "He wanted to know where you were. He knew I was calling you because..." And then she stopped, like someone had cut the cord. Later she admitted she'd spoken to a woman. "A secretary," she told me, voice small. "Tom said she was just a colleague." The image lodged itself like glass. Secretary. Colleague. R. Collins. I went to the local police station because there was a line there that couldn't be twisted. Money was taken from our account without my consent, and I had reason to believe it was marital theft. The officer behind the counter listened with that polite, tired expression that said he'd heard every betrayal in the city. Still, he took my statement, said we should file a report, and promised to look into it. The detective who took my case was named Garcia. She was mid-40s, with a gravity that made you speak honestly even if you tried to lie, because she would see straight through you. She asked me for every document I had, bank statements, emails, the little paper trail Tom had left. She thumbed through it all like someone reading a short, bitter story. "We'll get to work, ma'am. But these cases can be complex. Sometimes it's civil. Sometimes criminal. We'll see. Days turned to a grind. The bank did what banks do best, sent lists and forms and disclaimers that read like legal ice. The mortgage company gave us a week's grace. My head filled with numbers I had never cared to understand before. Overdraft fees, transfer routes, the way money moves when humans decide to move it. I learned the names of compliance officers and fraud departments, the taste of waiting on hold. And then a strange sliver of luck. Tom called my mother again, this time from a number that traced to an apartment complex in Miami. I felt a cold piece of real information fall into my lap. Miami. Offshore transfers. The puzzle started to arrange itself into a picture. I told Detective Garcia. She didn't blink. "We'll open a fraud request with the bank," she said. "If there are wire transfers out of the country, that brings in federal jurisdiction." She told me blanks I should have guessed: subpoenas, holds, freeze orders. She sketched it out carefully. We could try to freeze assets, put a hold on any accounts still in his name, and open a civil suit to get our money back. It would take time. It would take money. It would take patience. Patience felt impossible. Lily, my daughter, asked where her allowance had gone. "It's fine, sweetie," I lied, tucking $20 into her lunchbox as I pretended my hands weren't shaking. That night I did something furious and childish and necessary. I dug through Tom's email on the laptop he'd left on the kitchen table. I know it's not strictly legal, accessing his private accounts, but it felt like self-defense. I found conversations that were small, then warming, then crossing into the territory that makes you sick. He and Rebecca Collins, her full name, texted like people in the middle of a secret. She called him Tommy in a way that felt intimate and thin-sliced my trust into small, useless pieces. There were hotel bookings, dinner reservations, images of flights. There were also documents, spreadsheets, a PDF of an offer letter, and an invoice. Consulting fee $120,000. Paid. The more I read, the more an ugly picture emerged. There was a convergence, an office affair, a sudden urgency around a new venture, and then, the night before the transfers, a string of messages with coordinates. "Done?" "Tonight," she wrote. "Tonight," he replied. I took screenshots and printed things like evidence in a trial I had decided to wage against him without a lawyer. The detective took the folder with a quiet nod. "Good work," she said. "This helps." Garcia filed paperwork, and the bank placed a trace on the transfers. At the same time, I sat with a legal aid counselor who explained the civil side. We could file for a temporary restraining order, emergency freeze, and motion for temporary funds to cover essentials while the suit ran. She said 3 words that cut through me. "You might win." It wasn't a promise. It was oxygen. I thought about revenge. Not the kind that breaks bones or spills blood, nothing like that. I thought about revenge that fits into court forms, that moves through systems and returns what was stolen. I thought about making him explain himself before a judge and a jury of people who would have to hear what he did. I thought about making him watch me rebuild. I hired an attorney on a payment plan, Karen Holt, who smelled faintly of peppermint and carried a leather briefcase. She read my printed emails with a tight satisfaction that said she loved puzzles. Domestic fraud involving married partners can have criminal aspects, especially when funds are transferred without consent, she said. But married couples complicate things. The money is technically joint, which helps you. We'll file for an emergency asset freeze and a civil suit for conversion and breach of fiduciary duty. And we'll subpoena his communications, his travel receipts, his business contracts. We'll make a record. Karen's confidence steadied me, and slowly the machinery of justice creaked into place. The court responded faster than I expected. They issued an emergency freeze on any accounts registered in his name within 30 days, pending the civil suit. The bank put holds on certain transfers, and the mortgage company reinstated the grace period. But legal moves are clever but cold. They don't hum with the right kind of satisfaction on their own. I needed something else, something that would reach his pride, his image, the thing that had made him think he would get away clean, his ego. I started small and methodical. I created a fake profile. No lies about me, just a professional-looking domain, an email address that could be mistaken for belonging to a financial investigator. I posed as a compliance officer from an international firm that monitors for fraud. I sent a carefully crafted email to the company Rebecca had used, an outfit that sounded like a boutique consulting firm but was really a small office she'd worked in. I asked for verification of services, for invoices, for details on the consulting relationship. The email was formal, pedantic, and had that bureaucratic tone that produces nervous replies. Rebecca answered. She did not yet know she was playing with a woman who would pull threads until the cloth came undone. She replied with an attachment, an invoice, a contract, a W-9. Attached was a name of a shell company and, more importantly, a contact email that linked to a woman who hadn't yet scrubbed her network. I followed that lead, and it took me to an accounting firm in Miami that had handled payments for Frame Consulting, a name Rebecca used. From there I traced a graph of accounts and shell companies. I shared everything with Karen and Detective Garcia. Karen smiled in the way lawyers do when they see a corner they can press into. "We're building a pattern," she said. "That's what we need." At the same time, I started writing. I wrote an open letter, not published anywhere public yet, but a draft. It was about betrayal and trust, about quiet evenings and the cost of waking up to someone else in your bed. It was private and savage and cathartic, and I added details that were true because the truth had weight. I would use it later if needed, but for now it was mine, a way to keep my voice from being stolen with the rest of our money. 2 months into this, we had some wins. The court's temporary freeze halted a chunk of transfers. The bank reversed a few of the charges that were clearly fraudulent. The mortgage stayed paid. Lily's allowance returned. The world didn't flip back to normal, but it became livable. And yet, Tom remained unreachable except for one call. He called my mother. She told me. "He sounded desperate," she said. "He said he wanted to talk, to explain." I set a condition. We would meet, but only in a public place and only if his lawyer was present. I told Karen. She arranged for an attorney from Tom's side to be contacted via formal channels and insisted any meeting be mediated. The day we agreed upon the mediation, Tom walked into the conference room like someone who believed that charm could rewrite every sin. He was thinner somehow, as if life had been trimming him away. He kept glancing at me, at Lily's school photo on my phone, at anything that would make him look human. His lawyer was a bland man with an American flag pin and a voice that suggested he had rehearsed calming phrases. "We'd like to settle this quietly," he said. "Tom is willing to return some funds if we can work out a repayment plan." Tom spoke without looking me in the eye. The words that came out of him were slick. Mistake, temporary lapse in judgment. We'll replace what was taken, but I could see how rehearsed they were. Rehearsed words are thin as rice paper. They tear when you touch them. Karen leaned forward and laid out the truth like a scalpel. These weren't mistakes. These were premeditated transfers. We have records showing coordinated activity with Ms. Collins. We have hotel bookings, flight stamps, and the shell companies that received funds. If you want to avoid a messy public trial, now is the time to act in good faith. We will file for full restitution and punitive damages. We will subpoena every account Tom has touched. He looked at me then, and for the first time the man I had married, the one who once soothed my worst fears with a silly joke and a hand on the small of my back, looked lost. "Please," he said. The simplicity of the plea was new. I felt something like pity, sharp and unwelcome. But pity would not fix Lily's future. It would not pay the late fees or restore the years of quiet saving. I found my resolve in that. "You will make full restitution," I said calmly. "You will sign over whatever you have. You will cooperate with subpoenas. And you will send a formal written apology to Lily and me." It felt like bargaining, but it was more like setting terms. He agreed with a lawyer's tight nod. The agreement they made was brittle, full of legal loopholes and hedges. But it bought us time and a degree of safety. By then I had seen enough to know that partial victories are better than none. Even as the lawyers worked, I kept pulling threads. Rebecca's consulting firm started to fray publicly. I sent the right emails, tips with attachments, to a financial journalist I'd found who had a nose for small international frauds. I didn't publish my letter. I didn't need to. I handed a journalist a map and let them follow the breadcrumbs. The journalist dug. He called Rebecca's numbers, and suddenly there were reporters on the line asking uncomfortable questions. Who were your clients? Where did the money go? Why were there shell companies? The exposure did something more than frighten Rebecca. It knocked on doors in the small, interconnected world they shared. Partners, investors, landlords. People who had been complicit in small ways now had to choose their faces. Some chose to look away, others didn't. The more papers printed, the more Rebecca withdrew. She stopped posting photos of her new venture lunches. She changed her name on social media from Rebecca Collins to initials. People talk when they think their reputations might be at stake. Then came the call that made everything feel like a slow-motion reveal. Detective Garcia had tracked one of the offshore accounts to a bank in the Caribbean where a small local bank had allowed transfers to a shell company. The bank, embarrassed and under investigation, had begun to cooperate with the subpoena. They had turned over wire routes and beneficiary names. One of the beneficiaries had a business license under Rebecca's mother's name, a living person who had no idea she was on these papers. When Detective Garcia handed me the packet with photocopies of wire routes and scanned IDs, she looked exhausted and satisfied, like a soldier after a hard-fought campaign. "We have enough for a formal criminal referral," she said. "It won't be an easy prosecution. There are jurisdictional issues, a lot of legal wrangling, but between the civil suit and the criminal referral, we can make sure there's heavy pressure." Rebecca, when summoned for questioning, crumbled in ways only certain liars do. She tried to make him the mastermind, to say Tom had been the one organizing the shell companies and that she had only been a passive recipient. But we had emails, and those emails showed her coordinating. The text messages did not support her story. Evidence is a stubborn thing. The civil suit ran its slow course, depositions, motions, subpoenas that felt like a legal tempering of the truth. In court, in a moment that felt like the peak of everything we'd been living through, Rebecca sat across from me in a painful, tight dress. Her face was pale. The room hummed with the low noise of people who had come for the spectacle of wrongdoing. Tom's lawyer tried to maintain decorum, to keep the trial in the realm of numbers and law. But the testimony, my testimony about the transfers, Detective Garcia's testimony about the wire routes, Karen's precise legal questions, kept bringing the story back to the human cost. There was a moment when the judge held Tom's gaze and asked a simple question. Why? The courtroom held its breath. Tom opened his mouth. He stammered the rehearsed words, pressure, opportunity, the affair, and for once it was transactionally honest. The judge's expression became something complicated, pity and sternness braided together. In the end, what mattered most wasn't the money, though the money helped. It was the act of naming the truth and making systems respond. It was showing Lily that some doors close for a reason and that you can build new doors. It was the slow, determined reclaiming of life. Tom's phone calls stopped altogether after the restraining order and the public fallout. Rebecca moved away, her social media went quiet. The shell companies were empty shells indeed. The city paper ran a follow-up piece about how some domestic fraud cases had lasting reverberations. Detective Garcia got a commendation for bringing a complex case to federal attention. Karen sent me an email after everything closed. "You were brave," she wrote. "Not because you were dramatic, but because you did the boring, hard thing and kept showing up." Sometimes at night, when the house settles and the heater clicks and the little sounds of a life being lived make a soft chorus, I think about the moment when I first saw the balance go to zero. I remember the sharpness of it, the way the world tilted under my feet. If I could talk to that woman who sat in a car in a bank parking lot and felt her life unspool, I would tell her, "You will be okay. You will get angry and tired and brave. You will learn to value the small victories. The world will be less simple than you thought, but you will be stronger." My revenge wasn't a scene in a movie. It was a collection of quiet acts, printing emails at dawn, sitting in courthouses that smelled of coffee and paper, hiring a lawyer who could see what to fight for, and yes, sending carefully placed emails that started an avalanche. It was choosing to press charges, to go public just enough, to let the legal system be the scalpel that cleaned out theft. And the final scene? It isn't him broken and dramatic on the pavement. It's Lily and me. A small photograph on a coffee table, a laugh from the kitchen, the steady sound of rent paid, the smell of coffee, the ordinary triumphs. He is a cautionary tale now, a lesson in trust and accounting and the cost of choices. We are a story about the fact that sometimes the law, slow and grinding, will come around and set things right. When people ask if justice tastes sweet, I tell them it tastes like quiet. The quiet of a house where the phone no longer rings with lies, the quiet of a child sleeping safely, and the quiet of a morning where the sun comes in and your hands are steady again. The rest of the time I keep my ledger close. My own accounts balanced, my small business growing, my daughter's college fund filling one careful deposit at a time. I have boundaries now. I have papers in order. I have a lawyer on speed dial and a detective who taught me the power of paperwork. As for Tom, the city remembers him as the man who left, and our neighborhood remembers him as the man who tried to come back. People talk, as they always will. But when gossip flickers past, I'm busy writing invoices, meeting clients, making sure our lights stay on. When I pass the courthouse, I sometimes think of the judge's words. A life built on trust cannot be hollowed out without consequence. Lily tugs my hand and says, "Mom, can we get ice cream?" And I find that my answer is immediate and certain. "Yes," I say. We walk out into the bright afternoon, and for once the future doesn't feel like a blank ledger. It feels like pages I'm writing on purpose. The money return wasn't the end of the story, but it was the place we started again from. And that, oddly, felt like victory enough.